Brazilian President Luis Inácio da Silva arrived in China on an official visit to strengthen bilateral cooperation and to sign new trade agreements. Russia marks Cosmonautics Day this April 12, celebrating the day of the first crewed spaceflight. And in Somalia, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for large-scale international support as the African nation faces its worst drought in decades. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The President of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, arrived on Wednesday in Shanghai in West China, where he will begin a three-day visit to the Asian giant and will carry out several official activities. Lula's stay in Shanghai includes attending on Thursday the inauguration of his compatriots Dilma Rousseff as head of the new development bank established by the member of the BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to finance infrastructure projects. Lula will then travel to Beijing, and on Friday he will be formally received by his host Xi Jinping, with whom he will discuss bilateral issues and a proposal to set up a club of mediators in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, as well as talks with Premier Li Qiang and parliamentary leader Xiao Leiji. In Chile, citizens marched in rejection of the 9 law, described as repressive by several social movements. The various organizations mobilized, among them the Union of Workers of the National Human Rights Institute, warned that this norm promotes a very high level of impunity and creates a scenario in which the victims of human rights violations are left without justice. The text creates the concept of privileged legitimate defense, which grants procedural advantages to carabineros, investigators, or members of the armed forces when they should, if, in their judgment, their life and physical integrity or that of third parties are in danger. The controversial initiative, which has now become law, was discussed and approved in record time in the chambers of senators and deputies after the death on duty of non-commissioned officer Rita Olivares. In Venezuela, Tibisay Lucena, former president of the National Electoral Council and Minister of Higher Education, passed away on Wednesday. The information was published by Vice President Delcy Rodriguez through her Twitter account. President Nicolas Maduro expressed his sorrow for the physical departure of Lucena and sent his condolences to her relatives and friends. Tibisay Lucena was a Venezuelan politician, graduated from the Central University of Venezuela. She served as president of the National Electoral Council from 2006 to 2020, and finally in 2021 she was appointed as Minister of Higher Education.
There, our country began to know the name of a woman who was capable of standing out for her brilliance and intelligence. And that name was the name of the President of the National Electoral Council, Tibisay Lucena, who came to lead for many years the electoral power of the country. We can say that Tibisay was the head, brilliant, in the construction of the new electoral power. The fifth constitutional power established in the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. If anyone marked all the institutional functioning, all the construction of an impeccable system of absolute guarantees, political, technological guarantees, an absolute transparency of the electoral systems existing today in Venezuela, that person's full name is Tibisay Lucena, the brilliant president of the National Electoral Council.
In Colombia, the march led by the indigenous people of Valle del Cauca arrived in Bogotá to ratify the defense of native people's rights and the rejection of structural and racial discrimination. After an 18-hour walk, the first stop will be the Ministry of Interior, where the groups will expose the situation of vulnerability in their territories. The Minga took place after the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia denounced the systemic and generalized non-compliance of the national government with respect to the agreements signed in the context of the prior consultation of the National Development Plan 2022-2026. The Union ratified that it will continue to promote transformations that the country requires as a home where all Colombians can enjoy fundamental rights. In Peru, the political factors has played a determining role in the decisions taken by the judiciary against the former president, Pedro Castillo. However, the mobilizations along some United Nations recommendations on human rights violations in the protests and the lack of due process to remove him from office could be favorable for his judicial future. Our correspondent Ramiro Angulo has the details.
The place where the former president, Pedro Castillo, has been serving 36 months of preventive imprisonment, but for his legal defense, the former head of state is unjustly imprisoned because the due process to vacate him was not respected and because he also managed to get the forgotten sectors of the country to enter national politics.
Political participation and popular will are being criminalized, and the fact that sectors that did not have a presence in national politics have entered the political scene through Pedro Castillo is being criminalized.
Although the political factor has been crucial in judicial decisions against Castillo, criminal lawyer Carlos Rivera does not rule out that the alleged acts of corruption against the former president could lead to a conviction in the long term.
Beyond the case of the coup d'etat, I believe that this combination of acts of investigation and evidence that the prosecutor's office has been able to find, which shows that Castillo will probably face a conviction, not now because there are investigations that are formally still in a stage in which the public ministry is completing an investigation stage, but I imagine that this is not going to change in the immediate future.
Despite the internal inconveniences for former President Castillo, on April 5, the UN Human Rights Committee reiterated that the Congress did not respect the due process to vacate him and that extrajudicial executions were committed in the government of Dina Boluarte, for which the government will have to respond around the end of April.
Otherwise, the next round of sessions of the committee will show that they are not going to respect the recommendations of the report. And that this disrespect, this insubordination to the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights could have consequences such as the commissioning of high-level commission to investigate the facts in Peru. Or this issue could also go to the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is already a political body with much greater weight and sanctioning powers.
For criminal lawyer Antonio Castillo, the government of Castillo Terrones made several mistakes and questions the fact that Patricia Benavides is in charge of an entity that has received complaints in the investigations for the nearly 70 deaths during this government.
The prosecutor should not be sitting there because it's already evident that she has a lot to say and that she is hiding a lot about her degrees and her title that, at the time, allowed her to accumulate the maximum score to become creditor and deserving of the position she has as a representative of legality and society from the public ministry. However, with all the questionings over her, she's still sitting there deciding over justice, the destinies and the freedom of thousands of Peruvians.
Thus, the upcoming mobilizations and protests against the government of Dina Boluarte could be a determinant factor in the judicial future of Pedro Castillo.
Ramiro Angulo Maquiavelo, TeleSUR, Lima.
Let us take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the South. Russia marked Cosmonautics Day on Wednesday, celebrating the day of the first crewed space flight. The record was set in 1961 by a 27-year-old Russian Soviet cosmonaut named Yuri Gagarin. Gagarin's 108-minute mission took the space age to a new level and marked a historic achievement from the Soviet Union, which beat the United States in a tight race to launch a man beyond Earth's atmosphere. For the Soviet people, Gagarin's spaceflight was a triumph comparable to the victory over the Germans in World War II. Since April 12, 1961, it has remained a source of national pride, a symbol of courage and technological prowess. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday met at the Kremlin with the CEO of the Russian State Space Corporation, Roscosmos, Yuri Borisov. The meeting took place on Cosmonautics Day, a celebration to commemorate the first man in space. Later on, at an evening gala, Putin praised Russia's 100 accident-free space launches in a row, a feat the president considers a record in modern history. The International Space Station, which has served as a symbol of post-Cold War international cooperation, is now one of the last remaining areas of cooperation between Russia and the West amid the tensions over Moscow's military operation in Ukraine. NASA and its partners hope to continue operating the International Space Station until 2030. Russian military discovered at least 240 pathogens of dangerous diseases in 4 Ukrainian laboratories. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, most of the pathogens found are related to the anthrax and cholera diseases. Also, the Defense Ministry revealed that these infectious agents development facilities are operated by the military program of the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency. According to the information, these biological facilities were located in the regions of Lugansk, Donetsk, and Kherson. The presence of these laboratories, so far as the Russian army is concerned, proves that the United States creates biological weapons components in Ukraine and other countries. On Wednesday, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric informed that according to the Joint Coordination Center, routine inspections under the Black Sea Grain Initiative were conducted. The official called on all parties involved to meet their responsibilities.
According to our colleagues at the Joint Coordination Centers, they tell us that routine inspections under the Black Sea Grain Initiatives were conducted today, following intensive discussions within the framework of the JCC, supported obviously by ourselves and by Turkey. Our message is clear, is that we urge all involved to meet their responsibilities to ensure that vessels continue to move smoothly and safely in the interest of global food security.
According to the spokesperson, the UN is also continuing efforts to see the full implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding between Russia and the United Nations relating to the export of Russian food and fertilizer.
We are also continuing our efforts to see the full implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding between Russia and the United Nations relating to the export of Russian food and fertilizer, and Ms. Greenspan and her team are continuing actively to engage all the relevant parties on that, because that also needs to be fully implemented.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova held a press conference on Wednesday after being asked if the U.S. State Department had made any attempt to negotiate the exchange of Wall Street Journal reporter Ivan Gershkovich, who had been arrested in Russia on espionage charges, the Foreign Ministry official said.
We can see some strange dynamic of the creation of noise at the suggestion of the U.S. authorities or some other bodies on this situation. Apparently, they believe that if they make noise as loud as possible, hood whistle, then somehow it will help them. Well, they probably forgot the experience of their previous period. when this situation did not help at all. There are appropriate channels, there are appropriate authorities. They should deal with these issues, no one else.
Regarding Washington's denial of its involvement in the sabotage on the Russian to Germany pipelines, Sakharova said,
An attempt of the US side to get off the voiced facts with an energetic denial, spreading various fabrications and versions through the media, like the involvement of private companies. Some people in Kiev, in Warsaw, coupled with the slurred explanations of the US satellites, in fact confirmed the version of Hirsch. We insist on conducting a comprehensive, open international investigation with the mandatory participation of Russian experts. We proceed from the premise that all those involved in the explosions on the Nord Stream pipelines will definitely be identified, and the details of this crime will be revealed. Russia will do everything possible for this, will do everything necessary to prevent the collective West from drowning out this topic.
French President Emmanuel Macron affirmed on Wednesday during an official visit to the Netherlands that being an ally of the United States does not mean being a vassal. Macron, at a press conference in Amsterdam at the end of the state visit, asserted that being an ally of the Biden administration does not mean that the French government does not have the right to think for itself. He stated that his nation supports the One China policy and the search for a peaceful settlement of the crisis in the Taiwan Strait. Last week, in the framework of a visit to China, the French president already stated that both nations are strong advocates of a multipolar world and greater democracy in international relations, and they have the ability and responsibility to overcome differences and obstacles for multilateralism, global peace, stability, and prosperity. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat, dial 461 and enjoy Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the South. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for massive international support for Somalia during his visit to the country, which came as it faces its worst drought in decades. The Secretary General met in Mogadishu with representatives of Somali's civil society organizations working in women's affairs and empowerment, climate change, persons with disabilities, youth, and marginalized groups, and said he was deeply inspired by their vision and energy. Guterres said the nation was dealing with humanitarian difficulties while at the same time also combating a serious terrorism threat. Last year, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud launched a major offensive against irregular armed groups and claims to have killed 3,000 al-Shabaab fighters since the campaign was launched.
My last visit to Somalia in 2017 was during a large-scale humanitarian operation to prevent famine. Today, the situation is once again alarming. Climate change is causing chaos. Somalia has experienced 5 consecutive poor rainy seasons, and this is unprecedented. Between now and June, 6.5 million Somalis are expecting to face high levels of acute food insecurity. So the risk of famine is still looming.
At least 10 migrants were killed in Tunisia when a boat carrying asylum seekers to Europe from sub-Saharan Africa capsized. The Coast Guard reported the recovery of 76 migrants from Africa and the foiling of 2 illegal sea-crossing operations in the north of the country. The spokesman for the local court investigating this case detailed that more than 20 migrants are missing after the shipwreck. At the end of March, the bodies of 29 other migrants were recovered after 3 separate shipwrecks off the coast of Tunisia. Tunisian police used tear gas to disperse about 100 African asylum seekers and migrants who had been camping outside the headquarters of the UN Refugee Agency in Tunis for some 25 days. A spokesman for the Tunisian Interior Ministry said the police had intervened at the request of the UN agency and that 80 migrants had been arrested. In an open letter, the group of migrants from 15 sub-Saharan countries said they had taken refuge near the building after being chased out of several Tunisian cities following a February speech by President Kais Saied slamming illegal immigration. On April 3rd, the UN Refugee Agency announced it had stopped all registration and pre-registration activities from March 31st to April 17th due to a migration of the registration and identity system. Malian migrant Famousa Koita said many asylum seekers were increasingly frustrated over the long wait for their cases to be dealt with by the UN agency. A Kenyan court is considering a bid by Facebook's parent company Meta to drop a lawsuit accusing the company of exploitation and poor working conditions. The social network's parent company seeks to have the case dismissed, arguing that the country's court has no jurisdiction over Meta, as the conglomerate is not based or trading in the African nation. In March, 43 social network moderators in Kenya filed a lawsuit against Meta for unlawful dismissal. Previously, in December 2022, the company was accused of fueling ethnic hatred and online violence in Kenya and Ethiopia. A fund of $1.6 million is being requested to compensate the victims while legal proceedings continue. We have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.